Dankira Tehwagi Matangachu, Dankira Inya Garga Inya, Mulumuluga, Denanistena,
Welcome to the Black Open University Show, rebuilding education from an African place of being. Welcome to the Black Open University Show, rebuilding education from an African place of being. Build deep and complete.
Do you know of the water of life?
What's the big idea? What's the big idea? Original again, start from the heart. Not too deep. I see, I freeze. Mathematics, matrix, institutes, patterns. 1, 2, 3, uLearnNaturally. Classic.
Welcome to the Black Open University Show, rebuilding education from an African place of being. Welcome to the Black Open University Show, building education from an African place of being.
Dip and down, dip and down. We're in there. Dip down, dip and down, dip and down. We're in there. Inside of who you are. Inside of who you are. Time has its own way to be. Gracious behavior is the savior. It seems to be inside of who you are. The sky is like a storybook with sand in your eyes. See the light, come and see sunrise inside of who you are.
Hashima family, welcome to the Black Open University show here on Bless Radio. This is Astehmari Batekun, and I am very, very pleased to be here for another show. We're rolling through number 6. Yes, it's great. And yes, they say it's 2020 years since the beginning of something special, I think. But time, what is time? Let us reason on many things today, but before we do, let me open with our greeting, YehTehwagi Sehlamta, warrior greeting, YehTehwagi Sehlamta, Exir Yimasagan Hashima Tehwagi Ahsab. Create to be praised, respect the warrior idea. We give thanks to all those that have come before, especially to my beloved brother Omawale. He's the one I see, my link man. I see him as I come in, always holding the ground perfectly with the deepest Pan-Africanist reasoning. And I love to hear the Garvey talkings. Fantastic. And from such a seasoned scholar, we are really blessed for this. So, we give thanks to all the ones that come before. I haven't mentioned Lady Leo for a while. Lady Leo, big up to you, Supreme, and all the ones of the mighty blessed station. Engineers and management, we give thanks. And in this essential time, we should recognize that our living presence is a reflection of a very long lineage. And this show today, we're going deep. We're going in deep today. So get ready. For those who don't know, this is a working person's show. That means that we do work together. We work on the learning. We work on coming to know more about life, more about the space that we're in, the times that we're in, the dynamics of education especially. This is the Black Open University show. I am Astehmari Batekun, the principal for the Black Open University and chair for Abundant Centres UK Development Trust, which is a learner cooperative. We are an organisation based in Tottenham, London, at the Chestnuts Community Centre, where we run a number of very dynamic learning programs for adults, for teachers, parents, for children, from primary ages to secondary ages, for those interested in particular aspects of science. We have some particularly interesting courses around hair structure science, but also the Dankira Tehwagi warrior dance class. So we have a range of what we term unified knowledge classes. Unified knowledge is the pedagogy, the approach to learning that we use, which is family friendly, learner centered, nature centered, Africa centered. It is this way. It is a very distinct thing, and we're going to speak a lot about that today, because this show really is all about the pedagogy, revealing the pedagogy in context to different reasonings and developments and things that are happening inside of our own practice spaces, but obviously in the world. We should have to talk about things in the world and what's going on. The show, it has some particular sections, some specific sections that we work through. The first section is called Gzat. Gzat means province. It is about space and environment. So we're going to speak about space and environment. By that I mean, in simple terms, I mean astronomy, but from an African place of being. It's important that we learn to reconnect to our environment, but not only to the things that you see at your hand, but to the broader space, the broader environment that our planet is in. All of it is within our responsibility, and it's definitely within our ancestry to be aware and connected to and mindful of. So Gzat is the first part of the show, and we'll be speaking on a few points around this kind of area of science. The next part of the show is Zena Gize. Zena Gize is relating to news, the news, Zena Gize. So we'll touch on some things to do with the news. Typically it's educational news, but as you know, there's been some developments in the world. Everyone is excited about the developments regarding the murder of one of Iran's top military leader, and the consequences that may come of that. I'd like to share a few words on this in the context of education, of course, so we'll get to that. Then we come to the part of our show where we explore aspects of the courses that we do at our practice centers. So, as I said, there's 4 flagship courses, level being 9. Educating with Unified Knowledge, Foundation Course 1. Dankira Tehwagi, which is the African Warrior Dance. And the Hair Structure Science course. So these are the 4 flagship courses. Each week we like to touch into one or more of these with some insights behind the course to give you an idea. All of these courses are available to ones to enroll in, and they are very specialist kinds of learning, designed to touch our true nature, our true culture, to remove the codification around things, to make advanced knowledge more accessible, higher learning. This is why we hold the title Black Open University, higher learning. But it's not just for older people. We consider our younger cadets to be members of the Black Open University, and nobly so. They are taking on higher learning, and this is something for those who value that, who want to secure that kind of clarity for your ones, especially in this time. Then stay tuned and get involved. Ask questions. Regarding that, I should give you our way of contact. The main way is to come into our WhatsApp forum. So to do that, you need the number 079 30501777. This is the WhatsApp space. On there we're known as the Futurist, and we have some projects and web spaces around futurist work. So the Futurist, and then you come into our WhatsApp space, which is BOU Radio Show, hashtag in front of that, and in there we'll be releasing all of the show notes, special information just for that space. Things that we're doing as we do the show will come into that space, and so it's the place to be. Special communication, and obviously we can talk, we can have a chat through there. So please do drop into that space. Make sure you find that. If you want to check in on the past shows, go to abundancecenter.org/social media, and this will take you up to a blog space which has all of our past shows and the full show notes for every show. And you'll find we're keeping a progressive development. Big up to all of those who have been following through or listening to the shows from the beginning, first point, because you will see we're developing a clarity about the whole structure of unified knowledge. And today we're going, as I said, we're going in deep today, so get ready. So that part of the show is that to do with elements of the classes, and this week is pedagogy week, so we'll be doing that. The final part of the show moves into what we call a special feature, and the special feature will be around the pedagogy again. I'm going to draw on the writing of a educational consultant who's written some work about African universities, and it is interesting. So we've we've reviewed his work, and I'm going to play a narration of his work, and then we'll discuss it, because it brings up many important things which the whole pedagogy reasoning complements. We're still building up to the sababu, the reasoning time, but to be clear, I haven't left really much time for the talking on the show. I'm more interested in your feed forward in the WhatsApp space, because I am interested in this show being one that we learn together, and that means things that are said in the show, we can discuss them over the 7 days. We can build on them. If you have questions, we can develop those things, and I love the way that that's building up in the space. So give thanks to those ones who are already there, and you're very welcome to come in. Okay, so the first part of the show, that's the introduction to the whole thing. First part of the show, we are talking Gzat. We have always started with the Chereka reasoning. Chereka is moon, the moon reasoning. As the nearest planetary body, satellite to Earth, partner of Earth, is the moon, and as the nearest one, we should definitely pay more attention to its dynamics, its apparent phases of being illuminated, its cycle. The pattern of this cycle reflects something like a fundamental cycle that repeats. It corresponds in many other levels of science. You see a similar kind of spiraling, cyclical pattern, and with very similar qualities and properties. So when we study one, we can come to know others. Obviously, the moon has an influence on the planet. So just for some very simple, basic reasons, it's very important that we learn to observe it clearly. Tonight, you will be seeing a quite well illuminated moon. It's about 82% illuminated. It's in the waxing gibbous. That means it's illuminated beyond half, and it's growing. So it means it's coming towards the full moon. Chereka, you'll notice we're using some different language in the show. Chereka is the Amerindia word. A lot of the words I'll use will be from that culture. But in actual fact, we use this in our pedagogy, and you're going to hear a lot of new words today. Amerindia we use as a keyword language of instruction. So whenever we're talking on very critical things, that the language will come up like this. Or obviously the Kemetic classic culture, things like this language of the Kemetic culture will come forward as well, and we'll discuss these things in the show. So Chereka is coming round to full moon. The full moon will be on Friday. Friday, Saturday, you're going to have well illuminated moon. And this Friday, we're coming to a very special full moon, because the moon in its fullness will also be touching the edge of the shadow of the earth. And this is where the practicality comes in. To get the meaning of what I'm saying, we have to do a little bit of work to visualize the way that the earth and the moon dance together. You have the sun, and then at a great distance from that, you have the earth and the moon, which are much closer to each other, relatively speaking. The moon, you could say, is making an orbital movement around the earth for simplicity. And at some points, it's kind of between the earth and the sun. And at some points, it's kind of on the other side, meaning that the earth is between the moon and the sun. But it's in a cyclical dance all the time. Sometimes in that cyclical dance, it will enter into the shadow of earth, and we get effects on the moon, the appearance of the moon. So this Friday is going to be such an event. They're giving it fancy names. They give these things names: wolf moon, blue moon. You know, these names, most of them are not relating to the science of what's happening. They're just names to engage you as the consumer of media. So I don't hold up those names in any regard. The practicality is that the moon will be entering the shadow of the earth, the edge of the shadow of the earth, and so its coloration and some of the effects of how it appears will be very different to how it normally appears. So it's a thing to experience. It doesn't happen so often. It's a thing. So anyway, get ready for that. In terms of cyclical news, I was saying that the dance that the moon and the earth does, it follows this orbital pattern, forming an ellipse, and this shape is a very classic shape that corresponds to many levels in science. It also corresponds to the way that the earth moves around the sun. So in regard to that, we have special positions as the earth moves around the sun. One of those positions, well, let me give you the two basic names for the positions. You have two solstice positions and you have two equinox positions. The solstice positions are, if you like, extremes, and we've just passed one, and behind that we come to a point where we are actually the nearest to the sun. That was on Sunday, yesterday. So yesterday we entered, it wasn't the solstice, but it enters a point called the perihelion, which is the point when the earth is nearest to the sun. Now, you might be thinking, because we're here and it's cold in this part of the world, you might be thinking, well, why is that? That is about geometry. That is about the tilt of the earth in regard to the plane of its orbit. These are things that are best seen. However, we should learn to visualize just by the word, by the number, by the language of science, of geometry. So if I say plane of orbit, we want that to have a clear meaning. If I say it's tilted 23 degrees to the plane of orbit, we want that to have a clear meaning. It's reasonable. We can do it. So it's just a little bit of research, a little bit of guidance, and this show is to encourage you to do that, so that when we speak like this, we're visualizing what is being said. Hey, this is it. This is the real power of mathematics, to enhance visualization. Mathematics is the study and application of patterns, and to enhance visualization for me is the most wonderful thing about the subject. There are other important things to know, like making estimation, calculation and forecast, or to enjoy patterns. Just this alone, to observe patterns and to enjoy them, to make them, to realize the potential benefits of producing certain kinds of patterns that become clearer with number and measure and ratio. Anyway, so we've just passed this point where we're nearest to the sun. It's cold up here in the north because we're tilted at a certain angle, but you will notice that the south is pointed in the other way. So that the south, we're close to the sun, and the south is directly receiving its summertime. Now you will know in the news, some of our southern cousins are feeling the fire. The fire is burning, and this dynamic, this coincidence with the physical geometry of what's happening with the earth and the sun should not be ignored. So, okay, we've talked through the upcoming moon eclipse. We've talked through the fullness of the moon coming through at that time, which is on the 10th, Friday the 10th of January. We've talked through the perihelion, and inside of that there's more we could say, but I would invite you to check it out. The distance that we are from the sun, relatively speaking, is not that much more than when we're furthest away. It's subtle. An ellipse is like a squished circle, and that squishedness, it just makes little differences, but they turn out to be fundamental in the way that nature functions. So we should respect the subtle changes. I was thinking about this a little bit more, and I know you might be interested to know that if we talked about the way the speed of light, when we're near like this, light would take maybe 8.5 minutes from the sun to get to here. When we're on the other side, when we're in the passing the winter solstice, Yekata, the summer solstice, the other extreme, the difference is maybe 8 minutes and 12 seconds, a difference of 18 seconds or so in the speed of light. So it sounds small, but these subtleties make all the difference in nature. Nature respects these things. And so for us to really come to understand what can be done with that, we have to go deeper into the number, into the pattern. It's STEM, it's science, technology, engineering and math. And obviously we're going to do these things creatively. So this is Gzat. Gzat is province, and just to expand on that, the term province in our pedagogy, the Gzat, it has a reasoning around it, where we think of the Gzat as having 6 domains: personal, family, community, nation, earth, universal. And each domain has this aspect of land, air and mind. Land, air and mind. So the personal province has land, air and mind. The family province has land, air and mind. The community province has land, air and mind. The land and the air could be viewed as degrees of energy matter. The lightness of energy, the denseness of matter. The land and the air could be viewed in a way as a metaphorically like this. But what's important in this reasoning about pedagogy is that we connect the mind to space, and that's a principle. That's a African principle. We value that. We know that mind, universal, abundant. So, certainly in standard system science, mind and consciousness are not practically attached or recognized as relating to space. And so the whole consideration of what space is different in the culture of standard system science. So I'm making a point as a kind of preparation for the show, the kind of things we're going to speak about, differences between the culture of education, the value of the culture of education. That's why we have the strapline for our show, from an African place of being. The Black Open University is functioning from an African place of being, and that there's a meaning for that. Let's touch on the news. So you see, the one known as President Trump, the one in the office in the presidency for the United States, it appears that he has given a command to his forces to execute a military leader, the head military leader for Iran. Iran is said to be a sovereign country, and so there are rules for this. I mean, common sense says just killing folk is against the law, the human law, humanity law, basic like this. But apparently governments have made rules for themselves about how they should function in terms of killing each other and destroying populations or people in populations, or leaders in populations. And so the efforts and the reality of killing this man was done to cause destabilization of Iran and its function. They have said, America has said, and other countries around the world have said that this country and its leadership are doing bad things on the planet, and so they had to do this action to stop those bad things, or to curb those bad things. But most people can see that this action is opening up problems, and those problems will spill out, most likely on poorer people. Wealthy people tend to have ways to escape from the drama of war, or even they can make profit from it. And more than likely, the whole military complex for the US is making their shares are going up. Their shares are going up. So they're making business. This is business, as well as distraction, as well as destruction. So there's a lot in it. There's a lot in it. But I bring up the point about sovereignty for a reason. We're going to come forward with this word sovereignty. What does it mean to be a sovereign nation? Certainly Iran considers themselves a sovereign nation. And here at the Black Open University, we are more specifically concerned with Africa. And Africa as a sovereign continent, and Africa, every member that is in the region, considering itself to be a nation or a country, the sovereignty of each one of these. What does it mean? What does sovereignty mean from an African place of being? What does it mean in regard to the world? The position of African countries as sovereign countries in the world. Do we have sovereign countries? Do other countries consider our countries sovereign? What does it mean? So we're going to get to the crux of this, because the article that is our main feature for the show today, it makes some arguments about what African universities should do in terms of educational reform to improve what they're about. And I find it very interesting. The one who wrote for this, we'll talk about it in a moment, who he is in a bit more detail. But I find it very, very interesting, his article. And I'm going to use it in this show to connect many aspects of our pedagogy. So get your pens and papers. Get ready. We're going in deep with many, many things. Do you like the African landscape? I always bring it up because it is wonderful. It reminds me of several places on the continent, several relaxing places, meditative places, the freshness of the air and the environment. And yeah, it's good to travel. Big up to all those traveling. Big up to all those who have never traveled but are thinking about it now. Big up to you. Keep going, because it's time to travel. Get to see the world before some crazy leaders decide to bomb cultural sites that you might like to go and visit. Imagine that. Man wants to bomb the cultural sites of a sovereign nation, but the day before, man said that he loves the Iranian people. Yeah, this situation, I have to speak it directly to you, because we just have to speak clearly. This situation is already exposing a huge mental space between, let's say, European people and the people of the region of Iran. They call it Middle East, but that's not the right language. So the people of Iran and in that region, the mental space of these people relative to the mental space of European people is a huge difference. I've been listening to the commentary. So where today you've got hundreds and thousands of people in devotion and celebration of a martyr, as they would call it, a hero, a very significant leader, dearly missed already and never to be having his name forgotten in history, where you've got those people in Iran doing that thing, you've got people in Europe saying that this guy's a dog and he deserved to be slaughtered, terrorist and all the talk like that. This represents a very huge space in mentality and perception and consciousness, and in that space there's a tension now that's building up, an exposure of the space that everyone should be mindful for the development, and more directly, what can we learn as African people, well, as all people, but obviously Black Open University coming from an African place of being, I'm especially interested in the mind, the African mind, the view. What can we learn from this situation? What can we learn from it? So we're going to explore that. We're going to find out a bit more about what we can learn in this situation. In fact, before we get to the talk, there is something else that I should do for you, and let me do that now. We're going to come in with just a little interlude. I know you like interlude, so let me bring you interlude. Just check this out, and when I come forward, we're going to go deeper into the reasoning about African universities reforming. What should be done? How should the reform take place? Why should you reform? What is the principle of African university? This is Astehmari, Black Open University.
Welcome to the Black Open University show
On Bless.
Rebuilding education from an African place of being.
On Bless Radio.
Many people have lost, the practice, the one that the ancestors used to. So we need to relearn everything that has been lost through generations. So at the beginning it's difficult, but then when you have all the tips, it can be very easy. Not accepting your appearance can really lead you to make choices that could really damage your own health.
Welcome to the Black Open University show
On Bless.
Rebuilding education from an African place of being.
On Bless Radio.
The Book of Coming Forth by Day. Here begins the Book of Coming Forth by Day, of songs of praising and glorifying, of coming forth and entering God's blessed domain. These are to be recited on the day of entering in after coming forth. 1. O you who bring blameless souls in the house of the risen Savior, bring this excellent soul with you. Let him or her hear as you hear, and see as you see. Let him or her stand up even as you stand up, and sit down as you sit down. O you who give bread and beer to blameless souls, give bread and beer day and night to this soul, whose word is true before God. Lord of the sacred city before you. O you who open the way and clear the paths for blameless souls, open the way and clear the paths for the soul of this one whose voice is vindicated by you. May he or she enter in boldness and come forth in peace. May he or she not be opposed or sent back. May he or she enter praise and come forth loved and triumphant. May his or her command be carried out. May his or her words travel with you. And may he or she not be found deficient in the balance and be free from all fault.
Some of the people who were portrayed have the hair totally free, and sometimes they have like fake hair because they are actors. They need to look in a certain way for a film, or they just want to change. And it's not something that, to me, that is contradictory to being proud of yourself. The only thing that matters to me is that when you make a choice, you make it freely and without, thinking of fitting to something that is out of you.
2. May I not be judged according to the mouth of the multitude. May my soul lift itself up before my heart and be found to have been righteous on earth. May I come into your presence, O Lord of lords. May I reach the hall of righteousness. May I rise like a living God and give forth light like the divine powers that are in heaven. Let me proceed in peace to the west. May the lords of the sacred land receive me and give me threefold praise in peace. May they make a seat for me besides the elders of the council. May I ascend in the presence of the beneficent one, and may I assume whatever form I want in whatever place my spirit wishes to be.
Welcome to the Black Open University show
on Bless.
Rebuilding education from an African place of being.
On Bless Radio.
When you show yourself publicly, it's very difficult to show yourself as wearing your hair at their natural state.
2. May I not be judged according to the mouth of the multitude. May my soul lift itself up before my heart and be found to have been righteous on earth. May I come into your presence, O Lord of lords. May I reach the hall of righteousness. May I rise like a living God and give forth light like the divine powers that are in heaven. Let me proceed in peace to the west. May the lords of the sacred land receive me and give me threefold praise in peace. May they make a seat for me besides the elders of the council. May I ascend in the presence of the beneficent one, and may I assume whatever form I want in whatever place my spirit wishes to be.
So to me, that's helping young people to make their own choices, not being restrained by the idea that the way they look like doesn't correspond to success or your ambition.
Welcome to the Black Open University show
on Bless.
Rebuilding education from an African place of being.
On Bless Radio.
Three. O my heart, whereby I come into being, stand not up against me as a witness, nor oppose me in the council of judgment. Weigh not heavy against me before the keeper of the balance. You are my divine essence, which dwells in my body, the divine power which makes strong my limbs. When you come forth in the place of happiness, where we go, may you not cause my name to send forth an offensive odor before those who assign people to their rightful place. May it be favorable for us, and the hearer be favorable to us, and there be joy at the weighing of words. Let not falsehood be uttered against me before the great God, for surely your righteousness will cause you to rise up in triumph.
I love my hair.
What's up? Hey, team rooting for you. We're all beautiful. Enough love, enough love. It's your girl Letitia.
I love my hair.
And I'm down at uLearnNaturally Radio after winning the Miranda Braun Diversity Leadership Award. Woo-woo. And we're about to drop some knowledge on hair science. Stay tuned.
Mother Africa texturized our hair.
I love my hair.
Right, it's going to be super deep, super interesting, super cultural. Stay tuned.
I love my hair.
Nutriful, nutrients, and beautiful. Team rooting for you.
Mother Africa texturized our hair.
You can find me at Letitia_neutral_hair. Stay tuned.
I love my hair.
Stay tuned.
I love my hair.
And I think that nowadays generations are making a quite different statement, saying that you need to accept me the way I am. We are part of the society, and we don't want to hurt, to harm our bodies in order to fit to a certain standard that is very, very far from the way we look like.
Radio.
uLearnNaturally Radio.
uLearnNaturally Radio.
Yes.
Welcome to the Black Open University show
on Bless.
Rebuilding education from an African place of being.
On Bless.
የእኔ ግዛት እገባለሁ የእኔን ዓላማዎች የማስታውስበት የማጠናበትና የመመለከትበት ስፍራ ይህ ነው ይህንን ማድረግ እኔን እሱን ወደ ማሳካት ያቀርባል። ማንኛውንም የምፈልገውን ነገር ለማሳካት እችላለሁ። መላው የአጋጣሚዎች ዓለም ለእኔ ክፍት ነው። በየዕለቱ እኔ ይበልጡን ሚዛናዊ ወደ መሆን እሄዳለሁ። አሉታዊ የአስተሳሰብ ስልቶችን እያጠፋው አዎንታዎችን አዳብራለሁ። በየዕለቱን ማንኛውንም ጊዜ በእኔ አስተሳሰብና ተግባራት እኔ በትክክል ሚዛናዊ ወደ መሆን እየሄዱ ነው እሆናለሁም። እኔን ከጉዳት የጠበቀና በእኔ የቀን ተቀን ተግባራትም ሁሉ ሰላምን እየሰጠኝ በየዕለቱ የእኔ ካቢት ግዛት ይበልጥ የተጠናከረና ስር እየሰደደ ይሆናል። እግዚአብሔር ይመስገን። ሀሺማ ተዋጊ አሳብ።
Build deep and complete.
Do you know of the water of life?
What's the big idea? What's the big idea? Original again, start from the heart. Not up, too deep. I see, I freeze. Mathematics, matrix, institutes, patterns. 1, 2, 3, you learn naturally. Classic.
Welcome to the Black Open University Show. Rebuilding education from an African place of being. Welcome to the Black Open University Show. Building education from an African place of being.
Yes, Hashima. So we're going straight into the African universities, imitation or adaptation. This is an article written by Dr Eric Fredua-Kwarteng, and this was done on the 12th of December 2019, very recent. I'll put the link into the WhatsApp space for those tuned in. This article, we have beloved Yvonne, who has read it out, so she'll be reading through this and you'll hear the reasoning that way. And the article is not too long, about 15 minutes to read, so you'll hear that. And in this, Dr Fredua-Kwarteng is speaking about what he considers to be the right way to reform African universities. He's questioning the model, the way that they've developed themselves, generally speaking. He's a policy consultant for this, and he's got some interesting views on it, which you're going to hear about in a moment. And onto that, I'm going to just speak a bit more about our pedagogy and connect them in. But to give you a heads up to that, let me explain what I mean by pedagogy. So the pedagogy is the overall system of education, the overall value system, the embodiment of the principles, the overall ethos of the way of education. And every culture or every educational institution has some kind of pedagogy that they're working to. The ones that are most successful know what pedagogy they're working to, and we should know as well. If you have a child going to a school, the teachers in the school will have had pedagogical training. For Europe, the pedagogical training will come from a European place of being, and so it goes to classic Greek, Roman culture, Greek culture as a foundational reference point for classic culture for standard system education. Now, you will know that we've done research work around the flaws in attainment 8, some of the progress systems for secondary schooling, primary schooling here in the UK, and we found flaws in them. things that parents should question. How does that affect my child? What can I do to reduce the damage of that system, that way of predicting performance or boxing in progress? What can we do? So there's a lot of questions to ask for the mindful ones, and I see some of you have been writing in to ask those questions. I'm very happy to explore them. You're welcome to come to our office. We can explain these things in detail so you can see exactly what the issues are and how to tackle them. But essentially, a pedagogy is the overall defining form. And for unified knowledge, which is also known as YehTehwagi, unified knowledge, we have three bodies of reference to know it. One is the culture. What is the culture of unified knowledge? The culture is defined by being Pan-African and having Kemetic culture as a classic reference. The culture of ancient Egypt as the classic reference. And many of you will know that the European culture is also rooted into the classic African culture. Many of the scholars of classical Greece did their studies in ancient Egypt, and so there is a lineage that makes it a very noble position to take, and one that we should proclaim more often. And what we're saying here is that a system of teaching that is coming from an African place of being must identify its classic origins. Done. The next section, after thinking about the culture, is what are the objectives of this approach to education called unified knowledge. So we define them under 6 points. The first one being the development of peace. Next, the development of the mind's core. Then the development of principled living. Fourth, the development of productive capacity. Fifth, the development of healthful space. And sixth, the development of humanity overstood. These are terms that need unpacking, but I'm not going to unpack them yet. I want you to hear from the good doctor on his reasoning about African institutions, university institutions and reform, and then we'll connect these things together after that. So, first part, culture. Second part, what are the objectives? Now, with the objectives, it leads on to then what are the principles, processes and protocols that you're going to use to achieve the objectives in the context of the culture. And then you have the full summation of the pedagogy. In unified knowledge, there are 10 key principles. The first is Hashima, which is a code of respect. The next is Ma'at, speaking in terms of Ma'at as a universal order. Ma'at is a Kemetic term valuing order, justice, truth, reciprocity, this kind of quality. So Ma'at is the second principle, but Ma'at is also the third principle. In the third principle, it is in terms of Hisab, mathematics. So this is where Ma'at in the first instance as universal order is connecting to ethics. And we spoke last time in the last show, the good Dr. Mulana Karenga introduced us to the Husia, which introduced us to Ma'at as an ethical system. So if you didn't catch that, check out the previous show, number 5. So that is a well-developed form. I mean, if you want a modern comparison, you might put it in stature to something like Taoism, if you know of the Chinese culture for Taoism as a way. Yeah, you can think of the Ma'at ethical framework as this, as a body like this. Classic heritage, African culture. But this business of Ma'at as mathematics, as calculation, as proof, then connects mathematics to ethics, which is also a deeply African value, traditionally, classically. and is also marking a distinction between how mathematics is taught now and how mathematics is taught in a right-minded form, where the ethics come into play. Today, these things are detached, and so in that detachment, some misunderstandings take place. The fourth principle, process and protocol, we call Tehwagi Ahsab, which is the warrior idea. It's a philosophical statement for agreement and contemplation. The fifth is called Gzat, which we've mentioned at the beginning of the show. It's space, province. The sixth is harmony with nature, the principle of harmony with nature. Surprisingly enough, there are some people who think that harmony with nature is not the way for humans. They think that humans are against nature, or nature is against humans. In a right-minded position, this is not the way to look at nature as a conflict. Nature, you and nature in conflict. It's not like this. This is not a healthy state of mind. The seventh principle, process and protocol, we call mind, breath, body harmony. And this is the value essentially of breathing and how it connects mind and body. The eighth principle is unified knowledge language, which is a language system. I've mentioned how we use Amarenia in the system as a keyword language of instruction. There are many reasons why we're using this Amarenia. Mainly for simplicity, I would just put it down to the value of the script and the fact that it's rooted to a ancient language, and the fact that the script is used by the nation, the Federal Republic of Ethiopia, for its official international language, whereas other African countries are not using their own languages as their official language, official script, defaulting to other culture scripts, which is then outside of self to some degree, notably. So anyway, unified knowledge language, it embodies African script, it embodies African sign language, which means non-verbal communication. It embodies language through music, clear communication through drum and musical forms. It embodies, obviously, the writing and the speaking. And inside of that fleshing out of non-verbal communication and music as language and the script comes some subtleties of language development that are not touched by the standard system of education, because it doesn't have a unified knowledge language idea. So language is broken up, and mostly if you're in the UK, you're learning English, obviously. Maybe you're learning some other European languages, but many of our children are not learning the root of those languages, which is Latin. However, the people who are positioning themselves to be in charge, or having their children to be in charge in the future, their children will learn Latin because it's the root. It's the cultural root of the pedagogy in which they've placed their children. So if you have your children in a standard system education, then definitely you should have them learn Latin. But obviously, if you are coming from an African place of being, you will want to have a classical African language. So then we return to YehTehwagi, unified knowledge language, which then connects you to Gibbous as a classical African language with script, living today, full form. The ninth point is curriculum, graduation and accreditation. I want you to note that I've listed it as the ninth point in our principle, process and protocol selection. The 10th point is the story, and we value that story is the great tradition for Africa, for embodying learning and knowledge, conveying the wisdoms, and that the culture story. So those 10 are our principles, processes and protocols, and we use these things to achieve the objectives which I mentioned before within the context of the culture which I mentioned before, Pan-Africa, Kemetic, for classic reference. Now, the good Dr Eric Fredua-Kwarteng has written an article discussing the business of African universities imitating Western universities, and he's proposing that we should take on a model which is more about adaptation. That's the introduction. Let's have a listen to it, and let's have a talk when you've heard what he has to say. This is the Black Open University, and so we must speak on these kind of things. It's education from an African place of being and on a higher level.
Do you know of the water of life?
What's the big idea? What's the big idea? Original again, start from the heart. Not art, too deep. I see, I freeze. Mathematics, matrix, institutes, patterns. 1, 2, 3, uLearnNaturally. Classic.
Welcome to the Black Open University Show. Rebuilding education from an African place of being. Welcome to the Black Open University Show, building education from an African place of being. African universities, imitation or adaptation. Eric Fredua-Kwarteng, 12th of December 2019. Over the past few decades, Amartya Sen's theory of human capability, with its focus on expanding or enhancing human capital, has become dominant in national development discourse. It challenges orthodox development theories like economic growth, dependency, and trade. Accordingly, African governments have demonstrated an active interest in establishing or allowing private entrepreneurs to set up universities and other higher education institutions. These efforts have the principal objective of providing the populace with a formal means of acquiring new skills, knowledge, aptitudes, and dispositions, expanding or enhancing their capabilities. Human capabilities are considered the real drivers of economic growth, poverty reduction, and overall improvement in social well-being. However, does African universities' practice of academic imitation constitute a stumbling block to expanding or enhancing students' capabilities, and is academic adaptation a more effective approach? The vast majority of African universities and other higher education institutions imitate with a high degree of exactitude Western universities' academic curricular objectives, content, assessment approaches, and learning materials. The imitation occurs in all academic disciplines, including the natural sciences, social sciences, humanities, business, and technology. It is not only the pioneering universities established by African former colonial masters that are guilty of academic imitation. Post-colonial African universities are equally guilty. Academic imitation is guided by the following questions. What are the names of disciplines offered in Western universities? What courses are offered in those disciplines? What textbooks and other learning resources are used in those courses, and how could they be obtained? Such academic imitation destroys human creativity and prospects of producing innovative curricula and pedagogies. It also leads to wholesale importation of academic programs and courses that are grossly irrelevant to the development, expansion, or enhancement of students' capabilities. A striking illustration are bachelor and postgraduate degree courses in social work, management, and engineering. More specifically, it is highly unlikely that copycat courses in management will help to produce the entrepreneurs, managers, and administrators needed to advance the continent's economic growth, provide direction to bolster existing industries, and create new opportunities. Most importantly, academic imitation has the tendency to ignore local priorities. This is because imported courses were originally designed without due consideration for African society and the African economy. In other words, copycat degree courses imported from Western universities are not universally applicable. For instance, courses in bachelor and postgraduate degrees in archaeology and classics, Greek and Roman civilizations, are invariably imported or implanted from Western Europe. Consequently, students find them not only intellectually unstimulating, but utterly irrelevant to the development of their capabilities. In management studies, for example, it is not just that textbooks, theories, and frameworks are imported from the West. The case studies are too. So future African managers, entrepreneurs, and leaders are not being prepared to manage African-specific business organizations, practices, or problems. Social work education faces similar problems because the discipline is imported in its entirety. It does not focus on addressing African contextual problems like public institution corruption, tribalism, the impact of an attitude to HIV or AIDS, poverty, etc. Nor does it recognize African traditional institutions such as chieftaincy and African systems of land ownership. The recognition or participation of African chiefs is fundamental to the success of any community development project. It is not possible in an African context to discuss healthcare without including herbal medicine and shrines. Achieving international recognition. Most African public universities are preoccupied with achieving international recognition, and that is the principal cause of academic imitation. In fact, it is an old-age source of pride for African public universities to achieve a modicum of international recognition. Yet it is one of the most intractable colonial mentalities that contributes immensely to African underdevelopment. The core dictum runs like this. If our university's academic programs, courses and course content is the same as those of universities in United Kingdom, United States or other Western countries, then we are equal to them. This is an absolute illusion. It suggests that African universities, often touted as a tool for national development, are in actuality a tool for other countries' development. Furthermore, what happens to the local is that it is not considered as important as the international in looking at the relevance of African public universities. Nevertheless, from my perspective, the commonsensical expectation is that local priorities should influence the main purposes of African public universities, not international ones. If African society and economy are not benefiting from their own universities, that suggests that universities are irrelevant. One critical conclusion is that African public university courses, their objectives, contents, and pedagogies should all be designed with the African society and economy as their fundamental basis, and the effectiveness of an African university should be assessed based solely on its contribution to African society and the economy. The way forward. The way forward for African universities is to apply the principle of adaptation, which is based on taking a concept and making it one's own through creative modification or tweaking. It could be termed ingestionizing the concept. Its primary goal is to develop course content and learning materials that are unique and relevant to the continent. In this way, one could study the course offerings of other universities to gain valuable insights without having the purpose of imitating them. The adaptation approach is guided by the following set of questions. What need in African society do we want to fulfill? What academic programs and corresponding programs, courses, could provide students with the experiences they need for developing skills, knowledge, and attitudes that could be applied to satisfy those essential needs? How could students attending these courses be continuously assessed to ensure that they are developing those skills, knowledge, and attitudes considered necessary for expanding their capabilities? How are those courses organized and developed in other universities across the globe? What can be learned from the other universities regarding the curricular content, learning resources, and organization of those courses? These questions imply that designing relevant African-focused university courses involves elaborate planning, data collection, analysis, and decision-making. It is not simply a matter of copying or mimicking Western paradigms. Dr. Eric Fredua-Kwarteng is an educator and policy consultant. Build deep and complete.
Do you know of the water of life?
What's the big idea? What's the big idea? Original again, start from the heart. Not art, too in the deep. I see, I freeze. Mathematics, matrix, institutes, patterns. 1, 2, 3, you learn naturally. Classic.
Welcome to the Black Open University Show. Rebuilding education from an African place of being. Welcome to the Black Open University Show. Building education from an African place of being.
Dr Eric Fredua-Kwarteng. That was a very interesting article. I know that this show, as I said, we're going in a bit deep. This is a critique of the university modelling across the continent. This is a policy worker, someone with experience of working across universities in Africa, and his assessment is that there's been a lot of imitation of Western models that are inappropriate to the continent, African continental space and people, and that he's proposing a model of adaptation, still looking to Western model but adapting it and seeing what can be taken from that. So I've made a few notes and I want to share them with you for your consideration. This conversation, it goes through to all levels of education. So although we're speaking about African universities, really this is about education from pre-birth to beyond adulthood, entry to adulthood. And that is our own remit, pre-birth to entry to adulthood. But this conversation translates on many levels. So first of all, my main, aside from the fact that I big up the one for opening the conversation and for stepping forward to make a clear argument about the error of just imitating the Western system of education and modelling. I big up that because it needs to be said. There are many saying it, but it's not always well articulated and to the point. But I want to just build on what he said with a few more points of consideration for us. He mentioned national development discourse. So this is an important point, that a university sits in a position of national development. And these things I'm saying to you them to introduce maybe some consideration for university structuring and higher learning structuring, higher schooling, higher nursery schooling, higher childcare, the whole thing, education-wise, and nation development. If it's a national development discourse, it's nation development. So that should be clear, that the institution is part of national development. And that's how it is for most countries that have universities. The universities are part of nation development. So therefore, if an African university is not developing its nation, then it's failing on a basic function. And that should be assessed. He spoke about private and national universities. And in my travels, I've seen that there are many private universities opening up in the regions of Africa that I've been to. I've seen that, and I know it's happening across the continent. So there's an influx of educational organizations, companies, commercial companies, charitable institutions setting up learning centers and coming under the remit of educational provisions. This is an area that has a lot of potential, and those of you, I know many of you who would listen to this show, many of you would have an interest in setting up education in Africa. And I'm trying to urge us to think carefully about the pedagogy, think carefully about the root essence of the organization. So I think there is a lot of room for private institutions doing a lot of work on the continent. But that movement started a long time ago, and many organizations who basically do not have Africa's best interests in their hearts or even in their capacity are already there doing service of some kind, which largely is miseducation, because it is still attaching citizens to systems of learning that are outside of their nature, not from an African place of being, causing problems and shortfalls. So that's the next point. And inside of that, in summary, if you are someone looking to set up a school or an educational provision, then we need to talk. The third point I made a note about was to do with what he mentioned as the drivers for African universities. He mentioned economic drivers, poverty reduction and well-being. I would put it to you that a deeper consideration of this: if you have economic development, then you will also need, quickly on the back of that, you will need to be able to defend your economic development. So every nation has some way of defending its resources, securing its resources, sovereign wealth. If you can't defend it, but you are generating economic systems, then more than likely you're part of someone else's economic system. And that seems to be the case across much of our regions, as in wealth is seeping out, leaking out, being squeezed out, and it seems that ethics or other failings are allowing these things to just happen. So the next point I mentioned here, I noted down imitation. He's used the language of imitation or adaptation. The issue with imitation, because he's recommending adaptation, the issue with the imitation is that we have been in the past and for many up to now, have been imitating Western models of education without going to the root of it. So I mentioned earlier on, if your child's in a standard system school, primary school, secondary school, and you want your child to do the best that they can do within that system, then you should have your child learn Latin. It's not a joke. It's the classic language for the pedagogy of the standard system. So if they learn the Latin while they're young, then they will be able to penetrate the language of science, the language of mathematics, the language of medicine and law, and those things, those are important subjects. So, maybe your child is not going to be doing that because you think they're creative, they're the creative type. You know that one? My one's the creative type, so they're not going to do those academic things because maybe we as adults feel damaged from our own journey in the system, and so now we want to just run away from that stuff. It's not about that. It's not about running away from that. All of our children have a great capacity for all things called science. Science means to know. So when you say they're not good at science, they're more good at art, that is in itself a Eurocentric way of thinking about education. Science is knowledge. All human beings are driven to know, to come to know in some degree. And so, healthy human beings. So, let us not set aside science, and let us not set aside mathematics, which is simply the study and application of patterns, which is, in our classic culture, related to art, the ethics, the truth. Every African culture values truth as a principle in its traditions, values a system of ethics within communities, ways of negotiating difficult situations ethically. Our traditional cultures have that in place. So mathematics and ethics go together. When you detach them, there's a gap and a problem. So the issue for imitation, again, is that our institutions have been trying to imitate a system that is outside of the home culture, Africans' home cultures, without going to the depth of the quality of that, which is in the language and obviously in the culture. If you're going to imitate a thing, then you should have to imitate all of the culture. But you can't do that. If you are an African institution based in Africa, you can't imitate a European institution perfectly. You're not in the right environment for it. You're not surrounded by the drivers, the real drivers that make it work, or kind of work, in Europe. So the imitation idea is just deeply flawed, tragically flawed. It's a tragic situation. But anyway, for those who, like I said again, one more time, for those who want to imitate it and think it's okay for Africans to learn in a Eurocentric way, and you think that you can get your full potential, then you have to go deeper into European culture and pick up the classic language. If you're committed to that, then I respect that. I respect you and that. If you're not committed to that, then that's a problem. That's not right. Anyway, we can talk, we can reason. Let's reason on that later. So the fifth point I made a note of is the business of innovative curricula and pedagogy. He mentioned this, innovative curricula and pedagogy, and my concern was that he put the curricula in front of the pedagogy, implying that you can develop curricula and pedagogy is something after it. Maybe he meant nothing by it, but because this person is an educational consultant, I'm trusting that he knows what he means when he writes something like this in an article that he's penned. So I respect that. But my concern is that pedagogy is the overarching principle, the overarching body of principles. I've outlined the unified knowledge pedagogy. I've outlined the culture of it. I've outlined the objectives of it. I've outlined the principles, processes and protocols of it. And every pedagogy can be summarized in these three ways. What is the culture? What are the objectives? And what are the principles, processes and protocols? That has to come before you can start building curricular material. So I'm concerned about this idea of innovative curricula and pedagogy. The pedagogy must come first. Then you build curricula coming out of a clarity of culture, a clarity of objectives, a clarity of the principles, processes and protocols you're going to use to develop the best learning experience, the best learning environments. Do you get what I mean? I hope so. So, next point. Ignoring local priorities. He's concerned that the African universities have been ignoring local priorities. I agree. And local priorities, this is the key point. What are the local priorities? If you are on the continent, in Africa, and one of the many beautiful countries that we have, what are your local priorities? Do the educational institutions in your area meet your local priorities? I would put it to you, and this is part of our modelling for Black Open University. I'm happy to share it. We're open source like that. It is possible for a young person from their whole journey from pre-birth right through to entry to adulthood to come to learn all of the foundational aspects of math and science within the context of agriculture. Why do I say agriculture? Because agriculture is the fundamental business of countries. It's the fundamental business for human beings to sort out the food, to make sure that the food supply is working, and that you're innovating and producing better yields and dealing with different environmental situations that may come from time to time. Innovating ways to manage the whole environment. It is our gift to work the land in a way that no other creature can do. Humanity overstood. No other creature can work the land in the way human beings can. Reshaping. Okay, so let's say you're in the village. Your child is in school. Let's say they're primary school or secondary school. I would propose that if that schooling were modelled just as a default, not all situations have to be like this, but as a default, if more of our schools were modelled around agricultural schooling, but inside of that, we developed the unified knowledge approach to bring out all of the math and science and obviously agricultural skills that a young person should know. When they finish their schooling, they will be in a position that they have learnt about local priorities. It makes sense, huh? It does make sense. And the challenge is to assess what, let's say you want your child to also have an international comparability, peership, or leadership. Leadership. The African child as leader globally because of their brilliant education. Let's say you want that. Then you might want to compare. Well, how do children of this age or this stage of development, how are they doing generally in other parts of the world? What kind of things are they learning about? Will our children be able to meet with them when they are mature and help keep the world in good order? Will they be able to make meaningful collaborations together and secure the space? Or will there be dominance of one over another? We should think these things through. So anyway, local priorities, I would strongly indicate the agriculture as a fundamental local priority across the continent. And so the whole language of math and science learning should be fundamentally anchored into this space. Jumped out of the African landscape. The reasoning just took me far away, like I was going up to the moon. Couldn't hear the African landscape. But we're back on the ground. Okay, so he mentioned some subjects that might be problematic, like learning some Eurocentric subjects directly, like European history or some stuff like this. I mean, I think he would say that learning Latin was inappropriate for Africa. And in its right mind, it's not the first language to learn. However, Africa should have Latin as part of its curricula, but it's not the first language. It's not the first one. It's not the first classic language to learn. There are African classic languages to learn. Then you learn the classical European languages, you learn the classical Arabic languages, you learn the classical Asian, Chinese languages of that region, the languages for those regions. They have classical languages that give you a gateway into many other of the branches that come off the classic. So yes, African children should learn classical languages, and part of that is Latin. So again, even in Africa, we should learn it, but it's a priority. It's what comes first. It's what takes the first thrust, the first foundational laying down of what language does, which is to open the mind. The answer's obvious. What must come first? If you're coming from an African place of being, it's obvious. So he mentioned some things in that he was saying that they're Eurocentric subjects. But the reality is, most of the subjects being taught in our universities, if they are being taught in a way to be competitive in the fields of science, math and other general global subjects, and they are using, for example, English textbooks, which would be a key testing point to see whether it's Eurocentric. If it's dependent, if the material for the course has not been produced in indigenous language, then there's an imbalance there. Something is up. If it's difficult to produce the material in indigenous language, something is up. There's a problem for that. So this issue cuts across all of them, because most universities will force their students to use English as their default language after a certain time. Many secondary schools do that. In Ethiopia, there was a time for this, where a child would enter and be learning in their mother tongue and Amharic federal language, so those two as a baseline, and then in the middle of the schooling, everything switches to English. There's many schools like this. That's a very strange model. But we're here to fix that. We're here to put forward a clarity, so at least we think about it. And those of you with power to change that, or support institutions that model in a better way, then step up. We're ready for you. Okay, so there's that. He mentioned social work. Social work, really the social work is talking to psychology, social psychology, the psychology of communities. So it's communalism, it's the communal psychology. And that in itself, that is a domain. African psychology in its traditions, it's communal psychology. Yeah, we should have that well studied and allow that to be the basis on which we talk about social work in African communities. That's the domain of universities. African universities definitely must be holding these things. More should hold more of that. The illusion of excellence. He mentioned basically that his critique is that African universities feel that if they are comparable to Western universities, they get some prestige for that. And this is an illusion. He's right, it is an illusion. It's an illusion of excellence. And the counterpoint is that it's a devaluation of the local culture. It devalues the actual local science, the local knowledge base, completely. So it's a double whammy. One, because, as I said, you can't be excellent in the foreign thing if you are not going to the very root and classical place that the foreign thing has emanated from. You can't master it if you're not going to go there. So if you're going to go partly, then you're not going to master it, so you're not excellent. So then you're second, you're third, you're fourth, you're 100, you're 10,000th in position. And so the problem continues. Yeah. Local priorities. Society and economics. I think society and economics should be local priorities. Within that, what we're really talking about is communalism and shared wealth. traditions of economics, Pan-Africa, are run up against the Western model of property ownership. I note that there are some traditional societies that still proclaim their custodianship of the land rather than individuals owning the land, and they're trying to hold that and defend it. This is a traditional principle for many societies, and it's something that evidently needs to be revisited. The whole talk about going green and being more environmentally friendly is like a mockery of that principle. That the root principle is that people can't own the land. It's an asset that must be preserved and looked after as a custodian for future generations. So it brushes up against the whole economic idea of standard Western capitalism and even socialism to a good degree. Yeah, I know that's a hard one because, you know, people round here, we like the money, and we like the idea that the money round here is strong enough so that when we go over there, the money's good for us, so we can live in the kingly way, the queenly way. It's nice, it feels nice, but there's a problem for that. So this is where the ethics come in. Remember my arts? This is where the ethics come in. Okay, so he mentioned about studying other universities. Back to pedagogy. If you, because his idea is adaptation. He's saying don't imitate, let's do adaptation, let's study other universities globally and tweak what they got and then make it work for us. Okay, no, because if you don't have the African pedagogy in place, then you can't see clearly enough what you're looking at. You will end up mimicking, as you try to adapt it, you will end up imitating it and being off balance for this. So it has to be, African pedagogy has to come first, and then in my assessment, the only thing to do is to, well, let me put it like this, is to study African universities should study universities globally with a view to critiquing how they do by their own assessments, in their own context. So if an African university is studying the success of a European university or a Chinese university, Asian university, or other regions, then they should assess it by the way that those regions assess their own structure. And inside of that, to look at what appears to work for them and what appears to not work. What is not working? That's important. Because these systems, they're not working so well, even for local people round here in Europe. England, let's say I'm here, I can speak more clearly for this. There are issues. We're not performing well compared to other European countries. PISA reports, OECD, we know the reports that give insight to that. So that thing there is part of the illusion of excellence, like it's so grand and shiny to come over and get the Western education, but in reality most young people in England are not getting really excellent education compared to many other countries in Europe, which would be the peership for the region. It's a fact. You should check it out. So yeah, we should study universities globally, but it's a different eye, not to try and adapt anything, but to critique it and try and learn by critique, and then take the critique and any insights of what appears to be working for them and see through our own pedagogy how those things might relate into our own system. are they practical? Are they meaningful? Do they resonate in our context? Will they lead to national development, nation development? And so we come round to nation development. He listed some questions. The questions, I want to touch on these things as well. But before I do, nation development is sovereignty. You remember that? When we spoke about sovereign, the sovereign states. So let me just read out some basic definition of sovereign. A sovereign state in international law is a political entity that is represented by one centralized government that has sovereignty over a geographic area. International law defines sovereign states as having a permanent population, defined territory, one government, and the capacity to enter into relations with other sovereign states. That's the second point. Third point, as a side point. This side point is very important though. It is normally understood, I don't think understood is a good word to use in these lawful conversations. It is also normally understood that a sovereign state is neither dependent nor subjected to other power or states. Now, it's a popular concern. The influence that people feel is upon African countries. Africans feel influenced by outside forces. This is a common situation across the continent, which in practical terms means that most African states, the people in most African countries, do not really see their nations as properly sovereign. Properly sovereign. Meaning that they're not dependent on external states, external countries, nations. And they're able to resist influence if they wish to. But they can enter collaboration on a mutually respectful level. Most African states, or I would say the populations in them, would agree with me that that is not the common feeling. Now, if that is the case, then the function of the African university is to ensure sovereignty, is to ensure that the education of the population is of such a standard that its capacities develop the sovereign position. Because until you've got the sovereign position, it's slavery, it's abuse, and you know what that's like. We know what that's like. That's wrong. I mean, obviously, many countries feel it's okay to some degree to keep some other countries under their control so that they can milk out the resources so that their children can live good in the future, and the children in the places that they're milking out will be under them. Some people think that's okay. Some Africans think that's okay because they can squeeze themselves to be at the front and get a bit more. But generally I would say it's European countries like France and the UK and every other European country that has a stake somewhere in Africa is in that kind of arrangement. A disrespectful one, one that does not properly seek to support or respect the African country as a sovereign. So, sovereign state. This is the primary function for universities, to develop the national developments, the national priorities, and to function in a way that is met with the local priorities, the regional priorities, the national priorities, sovereign state. And so we come full circle, and to have a sovereign, to have a university that can develop a nation as a sovereign state, the university has to have a sovereign pedagogy. Unified knowledge. It needs a pedagogy that can define its culture, its classical reference points, its objectives, and its principles, processes, and protocols. The university has to do these things. If you want to test a university or a school, let's keep it simpler. You can test your school, the school you take your child to. Test the pedagogy. Ask the senior management to explain the pedagogy of the school. Is there a document that you can see to explain it? If there is, then that document should outline the cultural value that the school is coming from. It should outline the objectives of the school, and it should outline the principles, processes, and protocols that they use to achieve the objectives. It probably won't put it in a simpler way as I've put ours, but you should analyze it and find out those things. And it will save a lot of heartache down the road. And this is why in our last couple of shows I've been speaking about the flaws in Attainment 8, which is the process of blocking the educational progress, development of children by labeling them as foundation tier children at an early stage in their development, putting them into a educational system that means they can't get beyond a certain kind of scoring in their point scheme, which then means when they do leave the school, they will be second class in regard to education. They will be second class to those that were able to do the higher tier work. That means that they will be the employees to those with the higher tier grades who are able to manage business because they've been given access to clearer lines of knowing. For example, the classic languages and so on like this. The root principle behind the mathematics, the root principle behind the science, the languages, root principles. And when they're looking at the root principles, they're seeing historic characters that look like themselves. This is a good position. It's the right position. I respect it. It's the right position. Every culture should have a situation where their children can see in the classic heritage of the space, the classic heritage of the teaching, they can see themselves. They can see themselves. They have to be able to see themselves. If you are sending your one to a space where all of the classic development looks like people that do not look like themselves, and they cannot see themselves in the foundation of knowing, it's a problem. With due respect, it's a problem. So we come back full circle. It was a very, very special reasoning. I was very pleased to bring it forward. But the punchline to it is sovereignty. What does it mean to be a sovereign? And for me, this term sovereign, because you've got some people in this country who are called sovereigns. They're people. They're families. And they're sovereigns. So persons can be sovereigns then. You can be a sovereign person. What does it mean to be a sovereign person? Perhaps we can translate some of these ideas. So perhaps it means that you see yourself as one entity. I mean, that's kind of obvious. But it's kind of deep, because in real science terms, basically a person is made up of many entities. If you go down to the microbiome level, no disrespect, but all of you got stuff on you, in your bodies, around your bodies, that are other living beings. And you got a whole, multiple nations of them all around each one of you. You're moving about like one, and they're living in your system. But you're kind of leading that whole gathering. So if you consider yourself one, that's quite special. Especially if you're conscious of the diversity. No, I told you we're going deep. But just flow with the reasoning. We're coming to the end of the show now. I see my engineer stomping around the room. Yes, no problem. We're coming to that time in the show. Cruising. A sovereign person. The sovereign person should take the metaphor of the sovereign nation. Law. What kind of laws govern the sovereign person? That they can interact mutually with others, equally, without a power imbalance. Without being dominated. So yes, that's right. We should wish this for our children, that they can be sovereign beings, not born into domination. And if you don't know, we've switched into a new kind of thing with the whole algorithmic developments, where even the inequality, the injustice, it can be embedded into technology, so that machines can perpetuate the racism and the issues that have dogged the planet for so long. So if people are not educated in a sovereign way, then it's slavery. It's that kind of time. I do the late show. I'm on the late shift, so I know you may be hearing this in the daytime, but we're in the twilight hours, so I have to speak in the twilight hours way. And basically, it's freedom or death. Yeah. What can I say? I think it's time to say that again, there will come a time. There will come a time when the critical mass of ones hear the situation as I'm outlining it, and many others are outlining it. It's not just me, of course it's not. Many are outlining these kind of details. But there will come a time when a critical mass of ones will really take it in and decide to work together to secure that quality educative space. This is what the Black Open University is about. It's about securing, having developed the pedagogy and tested it over many years to great success. In simple terms, you might think of it as STEAM, that is STEM plus the arts. But it is, in its essence, it is better to be called YehTehwagi, unified knowledge. When a critical mass feel it properly, come to know it properly, the feeling is not enough. Come to know it, to know the culture in its defined and practical forms, to know the value of the objectives, to know the principles, the 6 objectives there, to know the 10 principles, processes and protocols, and how those principles, processes and protocols work together to achieve the objectives within the context of the culture. When a critical mass knows this thing, we will have greatly secured a better quality future. So, as I said, there will come a day, and on that note, I should prepare you for our closing music. It's been a real pleasure to do this show. I had actually thought to do this article in the last show, but it needed a bit of preparation, a bit more preparation. So now it is done. We've introduced the pedagogy in the context of African universities, Pan-Africa, the critique of those universities, the correct placement of pedagogy, and the correct valuation of sovereignty. Exiri Masagan Hashima Tehwagi Ahsab, Creator be praised, respect the warrior idea. There'll come a day, get ready.
There'll come a day. There'll come a day. There'll come a day when the presence of the moment will truly be all there is. It will be all that will be sought after, revealing within life's riches. There'll come a day when we will stand for truly what we believe in, honoring only the truth as we truly see it. And on this day, the rainbows of light will set us free. Deep within our souls we'll know that only the goodness must show. And on the waves will flow into the midnight we'll go. An abyss of which we'll have no fear, because we'll always know that the Creator is here. here in our souls, here in our hearts, here in our minds, creating within us a certain peace. A peace withstanding. Withstanding. All the arrows of persecution, all the vies for validation, a peace we've never ever known in this lifetime, but have many, many, many lifetimes before. Open the door. Open the door to your heart. Release the anger. Release the tension. Release the shame, blame. Release the fear. As you know, the Creator is here, here in abundance for you, so that you may serve another too. Honor that which you hold near and dear, for that is the only reason you are here. Yes, there'll come a day when all the pain and sorrow will wash away, and on the waves of love you see, that's where we'll be, you and me. You and me. You and me.
Build deep and complete.
Do you know of the water of life?
What's the big idea? What's the big idea? Original again, start from the heart. Not art, true indeed. I see, I find. Mathematics, matrix, institutes, patterns. 1, 2, 3, uLearnNaturally. Classic.
Welcome to the Black Open University Show. Rebuilding education from an African place of being. Welcome to the Black Open University Show. Building education from an African place of being.